FX Nation, what's up, guys? Welcome back to ForexU and welcome back to our advanced course. Guys, as we get to the third video here of how to identify cycles, this is going to be, of course, part 3. And in this video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the last cycle that we need to break down. Okay, so far we've been able to go through trending cycles, we've been able to go through market maker cycles, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to break down the accumulation cycles. All right, these are the cycles that basically are level creating cycles that do nothing but move sideways between support and resistance. So without further ado, let's hop over to the charts and let's break down these particular cycle, guys. All right, guys, so as we go ahead and we break down the accumulation cycle this week, and really the level making cycle. Okay, how can we break that down and really help to identify, how we can basically see it forming, right? So let's take a look at a couple of examples, okay, and let's break each of these weeks down so we can understand the behavior that's going on when we talk about the accumulation cycle, because it all comes down to, and this is with any of the cycles, whether it's the trending, whether it's a market maker, it's all about the behaviors. So, and I keep saying it, but I mean, it's just, I can't say it any other different way. It's just literally knowing the behaviors that market makers do over and over and over again. Okay, so on this particular week that we had an accumulation cycle, if we look at it here, all right, here's the whole week of accumulation, right? When we look at the previous week, what happened? What do we have? Just by looking at the EMAs, right, look how spread out they are. You should know that we're coming off of a trending cycle. Okay, so that's first. Second thing is what happens the first day of the week. First day of the week, we end up setting basically the high and essentially the low, right? So the first day. Now, we only get basically one setup on that Monday if you're trading Monday. That's a type 1 setup here, you can see from the US session. Okay, so you get that type 1 setup here from the US session right here. First leg, it's a multi-session setup where the first leg is in London, second leg is in New York, and then you get that move up. This move here really doesn't allow you to get into a trade. Okay, so we have this move on Sunday, Monday. All right, so pay attention to what happens on Tuesday. So Tuesday, what do we end up getting here? Tuesday, we get nothing but basically movement sideways. Okay, and do we get basically any kind of trade setups here on Tuesday? We possibly get maybe a type 2 setup here going down. It's not really something that's very nice and clear, and it's actually moving between the actual range itself. So not really an actual, kind of good setups at all, okay, on this particular pair on Tuesday. But the overall behavior of what happens, okay, we go from the middle and we work our way down. Where do we go to? The bottom. So on Tuesday, being that we didn't get past this bottom here, okay, we didn't make any kind of big false move, right? So we didn't have like a market maker type of move on Tuesday where basically it went down the entire day, right? Or it went down and then you had basically a retracement and then a continuation trade on the US session. We didn't have that on Tuesday. So because we didn't have that on Tuesday, that kind of rules out basically the market maker cycle, right? Now on Tuesday also, what happened that we didn't get? We didn't get a break past the low of Sunday, Monday. It bounced right off of it, right? So that initially would eliminate also a trending cycle, because if this was a trending cycle, we're just going to continue past that low and then have a rebound the next day. Does that make sense? So because we didn't have that kind of a setup and we basically bounced off that low and then went right into Asia like this, okay, that should tell you that we're looking right now, right here, as support and resistance, basically, right? And we're looking at potentially already having a accumulation cycle. All right. Now, the next day on Wednesday, what happens? Well, we get a setup here on Wednesday. It ends up being like a type 1 setup here that moves. And then you end up getting a reversal during the New York session, right? So basically, you stay within this little comfort zone of the range. And then during after hours of the New York session, you basically get a big move here that goes up to the top. What happens on Thursday? Thursday comes down. Doesn't basically do anything. You see this. You only get one setup here, which is I believe it looks like a type 1 setup going down during London, and that goes down the entire day. Where does that go down to? It goes down to the bottom, right? This goes all the way down to the bottom here. Now, this is Friday. All right. Now, Friday is the day that I've told you guys before that I don't like to trade, because Friday really doesn't seem to go along with what happened pretty much the rest of the week. Why? Because they're setting up for the next week's cycle. Okay. So Friday, you may not get a bounce off of the bottom here. Okay. Like literally like what happened here. You basically end up getting a type 3 setup to go down, and then you get a multi-session type 1 setup to go up, back up to the 200 on Friday. Okay? But it basically trades below the range where you've been the entire week. Okay? So let's talk about the different aspects of this particular week. What did we learn from this week? Well, this week we know that on Tuesday we didn't have a move in just one direction the whole week like we would normally have in a market maker cycle, or potentially in a trending cycle, right? We also didn't break the low of Sunday, Monday on Tuesday. We actually reversed right at that low on Tuesday from the Sunday, Monday. So the initial low right here that was set on Sunday, Monday was never penetrated on Tuesday. It basically bounced off of that and it went up. That movement right there should verify for you that you're in an accumulation cycle. Okay? So it's all in the behavior that happens here, guys. If you notice what happens here on Tuesday, if this is going to be a market maker cycle on Tuesday here, we would basically get a type 1 setup W here to go up. That's what we would get, right? We didn't get that, all right? Or if this was going to be, let's say, a trending cycle, and let's just say this is how it played out on Tuesday like this, and the Asian session was like this, we would get basically either a type 2 or type 3 trade to basically go down and break past this low. Okay? Because that would make sense if you're coming off of a trending cycle. If you're going to have another trending cycle back to back, that's perfectly fine. Basically, you'd have, right, like something like this, and then go down again, right? And so this would basically be either a type 2 trade that goes down and breaks past this low, or a type 3 setup. It's the only two setups that you could have. Okay? So those kind of behaviors on Tuesday would allow you to know essentially what type of cycle you're in. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. And obviously, the weekly cycles that we talk about, they don't always start on Monday. Okay? There will be times where the cycle will not end on a Friday but continue until like Tuesday of the following week. Why do they do this? Well, they do it because they want to keep you guessing and to keep you confused as to what's going on. Okay? So, very important to understand, and this happens a lot of times when you have a false move Sunday, Monday. So if you ever notice that you have a false move Sunday, Monday just in one direction, right? Look at the previous week. Did you have a trending cycle the previous week? Because if you had a trending cycle the previous week, there's a very strong likelihood that the Sunday, Monday false move in one direction was just basically the end of that trending cycle. Okay? So, also recognize and understand that there will be times where this starts out as an accumulation cycle like this, and then let's say on Thursday they decide to start setting up for the following week. Okay? And so basically they will break out of this structure and into basically, let's say, go up. They'll basically do this and go up. And then this basically starts, sets up basically them doing another trending cycle next week, or something to that effect. So just be aware, okay? I just want you guys to be aware that the cycles sometimes do not start on Monday. All right, sometimes there are continuations, basically, from the previous week that end literally on a Tuesday, and then that's why sometimes when you have a hard time and you're looking back at the weekly cycles, and if you have a hard time kind of guessing, trying to not even guessing, but trying to figure out really what kind of cycle that is. You're like, man, this is a really weird cycle. I can't tell what it is, right? Check out the previous week and see, does the previous week basically extend into the current week that you're in? And that's why you can't figure out what type of cycle it is. Okay? So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're looking at it, you're like, man, I can't figure out what it is. Like, it doesn't look like a trending cycle. It's like half trending cycle, half accumulation cycle, and you kind of don't know, can't figure it out. Literally look at the previous week and see if the run started on the previous week. Okay? And all they're doing basically is they're just throwing the whole thing off. They're throwing you off because you're expecting a perfect cycle every Monday through Friday, every Monday through Friday, every Monday through Friday. Well, that makes it very predictable, right? It makes it very predictable. So just understand what they're doing and what's happening. All right? So let's take a look at a couple more cycles here of accumulation, and let's break those down. All right, so this is another one here. So this is euro pound, and same thing. Let's start with Sunday, Monday. Pretty much what happened Sunday, Monday. The initial high is set, right? The initial low is essentially set, right? So Sunday, Monday, the high and low is set, and then we go into Tuesday. Now what happens on Tuesday? Pretty much a bunch of nothing, right? You get movement sideways throughout the Asian session, and I don't think, maybe you get a type 2 here with the second leg going up. Okay, you get that possible trade there. And then really nothing else. But the key point on Tuesday is look what's happening here. These are the highs. Look what happens. These highs are kept, right? The highs are never penetrated. So that right there, number one, the behavior on Tuesday, again, helps you figure out what type of a cycle you're going to have, because if it's a market maker cycle, If this is a market maker cycle, again, you would have a false move to the low and then rise all in a day. It's a full day of rise or drop on Tuesday on a market maker cycle. You didn't have that, did you? You didn't have that at all. You had a bunch of crap, basically, on Tuesday, right? You had basically nothing, a bunch of crap on Tuesday. All right, and then now look what happens on Wednesday. So Wednesday, we level off. We have our Asian range. We spike down. We come up to the middle. Basically get a type 3 setup straight down. Okay. Where do we go to? We basically go to the low Sunday, Monday. And you can see we basically stay there the whole day. Going into Wednesday. Wednesday, what happens on Wednesday? Basically, we get on Wednesday, we get a type 2 setup to go down, but then it comes back up. You see that? It's like it tries to convince all of the traders, look, by this time that you're here, I want you to look at this. By the time that you're here, what are you convinced that the market is doing? Look, I want you to look at the bigger picture and look, what has the market been doing the past 2 weeks? Trending down, right? Trending down the last 2 weeks. Okay, so now you've broken this structure here, right? And you've stayed at that line, and then you've broken below that line, right? That was initially set by Sunday, Monday low. And look, at this point in time, literally, they're convincing people to go short because they want to do what? Get people to follow the trend, right? All the EMAs are above you, right? So follow the trend. So people sell and sell and sell. Okay. Now, if you want to sell this as a trade setup, okay, is it a good trade setup? It's a type 3 setup basically, right? You didn't really make it to the bottom here of the Asian range, so it's not really the best looking possible setup. Is it a trade? Sure, it is. Type 3 setup here. You have pins to the 200 in the middle of the range, so you do have a trade setup here. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you should not be aware of the bigger picture of what's going on, and this being basically a fake out, because they just come right back up and look. So this behavior here on Thursday, is a confirmation to you of what's going on. Okay, because all they're doing is trying to convince people to go straight down to sell. And so what happens on Friday is what? Nothing. Do you see that? Look what happens on Friday. Nothing. 15 pip Asian range, 20 pip London range, and a 17 pip New York range. Okay? So now they got all these traders trapped here on Thursday. They came all the way back up here, and now they just hustle the whole day. Basically, they're letting them get trapped for the weekend, so they charge them swap, right? So pay attention to what ends up happening throughout the week. Okay? So very important in this particular cycle. Notice the different variations on the same theme. Most importantly, notice the correlation between the last accumulation cycle that we saw and this one, which is Tuesday. What happens Tuesday helps you determine what potential cycle you're in. All right, let's take a look at another one. All right, so here is another one, okay? And same thing, let's go through what happens Sunday, Monday. We set the initial high, we set the initial low for that week. Okay, so basically make a huge move to the top on Sunday, Monday, and then pretty much move sideways the rest of the day. What happens on Tuesday? Look what happens on Tuesday. Look, what happened on Tuesday? Okay, you get basically a 30 pip Asian range, a strong spike move up to the 800, basically makes an M here, and then comes straight down, right? So there's a type 1 setup here, and then basically a reversal during the New York session. Although I don't think it's a really good trade because obviously the EMAs are way too separated to get into a trade. But the overall behavior of what happens on Tuesday is nothing but this, right? Remember I told you guys like the hospital heart monitors like this, right? Same thing. So what happens on Tuesday? Nothing, right? You don't get movement in one direction, all in one direction in one day, like you would expect to have it happen in a market maker cycle. So you know you're not in a market maker cycle. You know that you didn't break and go higher above and create higher highs to have a trending cycle, right? So you know that you are basically in a accumulation cycle, okay? And so because you're in an accumulation cycle, you're really more focused on trading the pattern more than anything, right? On accumulation cycles, on level making cycles, guys, you're hugely more interested in trying to find the right pattern and timing. Pattern and timing is huge, okay? Because it's not like you can predict the next, day like you would on a trending cycle where you're just looking for sell on a bias, okay? You don't have a bias basically in an accumulation cycle. All right, because it could go either way because you're going back and forth between support and resistance. It's not like a trending cycle where you have a bias. It's not like a market maker cycle where you have a bias on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or even on Tuesday. You know what I mean? So you don't have a bias here at all. You basically you're trading solely on a pattern and timing. And can you get the right pattern and timing at the right place? Right? So this may be a pattern here of a W, right? But does it make sense to actually trade it because you have so much separation here between the 5 and the 13 that really your entry would be something like this. If you wait for just a 13 close and then a pullback, your entry would be somewhere here, right, to go up. And granted, that's about 30 something pips or so. About 11 pip range or so. I mean, that would be the trade. If not, if you're waiting for, let's say, the crossover to happen, the crossover happens all the way at the top here, right? So if you know that you're in a accumulation cycle, that's really not a good trade to take because you're already at the top, right? You're already at the top of the line. So it's already too late to take. And even if you wait for the pullback here, I mean, you're still, it's still not worth it. This is not a clear setup to take because of the fact of the cycle that you're in. All right, the better setup to take would be the type 1 here. Okay, that's in London. All right, because this one is way better because if you wait for the crossover candle to happen, which is this one here, you get the pullback and then your entry basically is all the way up here, and now you're looking at a way better trade, a 3 to 5, almost a 5 to 1 risk to reward ratio on it. That makes a lot more sense to do. You know what I mean? But anyway, so Tuesday you get nothing but sideways movement, right? We go into Wednesday, what happens? Wednesday, you go up for a type 1, come back down. This is not a trade, by the way. This is not a trade. This is just me telling you that goes all the way up past the Asian range for a type 1, but it's really not a trade because you really don't get a clear setup here. Okay, even into the New York session, you really don't get anything that's really good of a setup. This candle here is way too big to get in on. By the time you get the retracement all the way back up here, you're kind of like unsure whether or not to even take the trade. So it's not really worth a good day to trade. This going into Thursday, you see it basically moves sideways. Thursday, okay, what happens Thursday? You get a nice multi-session W type 1 setup during the New York session. Right? So that is a good setup there. Okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. It's clear. Nice. Okay? Nice, clear type 1 pattern. That makes sense. The other stuff doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay? Especially on Wednesday. Wednesday, that sucks. But look what happens. Basically, we start here the day. We end pretty much near where we started. And then on Friday, same thing. We started here and pretty much almost where we started. And look, there's no real good setups at all on Friday. So an accumulation cycle, guys, you can see that there's, in this case, there was 1, 2, 3 actual setups throughout that week that were the clearest setups that you could possibly trade, and you're way more focused on the pattern and the timing than anything else. Okay, but the behaviors essentially are literally the same. You can see from the accumulation cycles. Okay, you can see that essentially the behavior is all the same. All right. All right, so let's take a look at a couple more here. All right, so let's take a look at this one. So this one here, same thing. We set the initial high, the initial low on Sunday, Monday. On Tuesday, right, we want on Tuesday, because of what happened on Sunday, Monday, I would want this, if prices like this, doing this, I would expect a false move or a type 2 and then rise the whole day, right? If I get that, now I'm like, okay, cool. I may have a market maker cycle here, okay? If I break past this high, cool. I have a trending cycle, okay? But we don't get that on Tuesday, do we? What do we get on Tuesday? The same thing that we've seen in the other examples. We get complete garbage trash on Tuesday, meaning complete sideways movement at all. That's all we get on Tuesday. Look. So this behavior on Tuesday, like literally, it should click a switch and letting you know that this is going to be an accumulation cycle. This is complete, utter garbage on Tuesday. Wednesday. Look what happens on Wednesday. Nothing. Complete garbage. Again, nothing. You don't get nothing on Wednesday. As far as a possible trade setup on Wednesday, I mean, it don't look really good. You know what I mean? It don't look really good. Thursday. What do we get on Thursday? You get a type 3 setup to going up on Thursday. And then that's really it. This is all way too crazy choppy. Tell me you're going to take a trade during that crap. Does that look at all feasible to try to get into a trade? Like, this looks like complete utter mess. Even though it moved 103 pips, like, there's no clear setups at all. Okay, remember that we're not here to just simply trade every single day. We're here to trade the best possible setups and the clearest possible setups. So if the setups are not there, we're not trading. Okay, you get paid to wait, and you get paid to wait for the right setup. All right, we're not taking every single setup that we look at. Look what happens on Friday. Like nothing. Like that week was complete garbage. Garbage. There was literally like not one trade that I feel was clear enough for you to take. Maybe this type 3 here. Maybe. But like everything else is complete garbage. So here's the thing that you have to understand is I feel you have to understand and be self-aware of the fact that if you see this kind of stuff, be the bigger person. Be like, yo, I'm not trading that crap. I won't accept that. Okay? Just like, for example, if you're single and you're looking for a relationship, there are certain things that you will not accept as, as a person, right? As looking for a significant other. There are just certain things that you don't accept, that you will not accept, right? And it doesn't matter how cute they are. It doesn't matter anything else. Like if they don't do this stuff, like it's just not something that you're attracted to in the other person, So it should be the same thing with this. I really think a lot of the retail traders are just literally like a slave to the charts because they're just willing to accept whatever because all they want to do is get money. They're so worried about making money. So be self-aware of what the chart is presenting to you, and that it's presenting complete garbage to you, and that you're not willing to accept and trade complete garbage. All right? So, again, these accumulation cycles, okay? Key, again, is Tuesday. Tuesday is the key. All right? Tuesday is the key on accumulation cycles. And just be self-aware enough to understand that if you're getting crap, literally there's 28 other pairs that you can possibly trade. All right? This is not the only pair. And I understand that some of you may be focusing in on one pair. That's completely fine. Focus in on one pair. If you're going to trade only one pair, that's completely fine as well. But also be self-aware that because that one pair that you're trading, that you're concentrating on, you should be able to really quickly analyze and understand that that pair is giving you complete garbage for that day, right? So you know that you're not trading that pair that day. Okay? And having the humility and the self-awareness to just stop and be like, hey, you know what? This is not what I want to trade, so I'm not going to trade. Even though your mind and your brain is telling you, bro, you're missing out on a trade. You're missing out on money today. You have to understand the bigger picture of what's going on. That today is just one day. That's it. There's going to be tomorrow, day after that, next week, next month, next year. And if you want to do this for over a long period of time, the faster that you can control that, the better it's going to be. Guys, so understand that, these cycles obviously are not perfect, but understand the behaviors, guys. I can't stress it enough. Understanding the behaviors will teach you so much. Okay? A prime example of what I was talking about earlier with the cycles running into the next week is this. This is pound USD, and this is basically what I'm talking about, where you had a trending cycle one full week, and then they go into Monday, Tuesday to end that trending cycle. Okay? And then you end up coming down and basically start to create an accumulation cycle on Wednesday. You see this? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it goes all the way to Tuesday of the following week. And then on the following week after that, that's when they start another different cycle. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about when they throw stuff off. Okay? That's literally what I'm talking about when they throw things off. You see how on this day here, this week here, you had an accumulation cycle. What happened on Friday? Friday, they broke past that to set up for what? A trending cycle the next week, right? And they kept that trending cycle going for an extra 2 days. You see that? So understand that once they do this, it throws off basically the Monday through Friday type of cycle. So if your pair is doing this behavior, learn to recognize it, right? And learn that there's going to be a week where they get back on track on a Monday through Friday thing, right? But right now they're not doing that because they're really trying to mess up traders. Okay. All right, guys, welcome back. I hope that watching this series of 3 videos has increasingly help you identify basically the cycles and how to predict to the best of your ability the cycles that are going to be presented to you that week. Now, I can tell you that in order to get really good at this, guys, I always keep telling you guys, the only best way to get good at this is to continue to backtest. And as you're backtesting, as you're going into Monday, Tuesday, see if you can start to identify what type of cycle it is, so you can start to see what possible trades are we going to have for that week. Okay, I think this is going to be a huge part in your trading, is trying to identify what kind of cycle you're going to be in, so that way you know what type of trades to expect or what type of trades not to expect. Remember that all we're trying to do is just be consistent in what we're doing with our trading plan and with our trades. All right, consistency and the right trade setups is going to ultimately allow you to get the ultimate goal, which is money, of course, and allow you to be a long-term consistent trader. Okay, of course it takes time, and of course you have to do your part in backtesting. And as you're backtesting and looking for the setups of the pattern and timing, now you want to make sure to emphasize and try to identify the cycle that you're on. All right, guys, thank you so much. Until the next video, guys, have a great and wonderful rest of your either weekend or trading week.